In terms of the community, you need to make sure that there is proper communication. Remember, with these ones, actually, you don't necessarily have a legal relationship with them. It's a more social relationship because you don't have a contract with each other. You might be in the same mall, you might be paying the same landlord, but you guys don't have a contract. You might be in a community operating your business, you might not have a contract with the community. You might be in an industrial park, you might be part of an association where you are subscribing to the association, whatever, but you don't necessarily have a contract with your fellow members. To avoid getting into these conflicts, or maybe more especially on non-performance and all those things, you need to have your performance management system on lock, where you will be able to monitor the performance. You engage on the performance, you set targets. If they achieve targets, you give them bonuses and all those things. So you need to have your performance management in place so that you're consistently monitoring the performance of your employees. You don't wait when the employee is not performing and you start giving them feedback then. Good day. Welcome to another lesson on our entrepreneurship master program. Today we are looking at stakeholder management. How do you manage your stakeholders? We've went through the topic. This is the last module in this skills program. Today we're looking at how you resolve the stakeholder conflict. We started with introduction to stakeholder management. Then we did a module on how to identify stakeholders and how to assess the stakeholders' requirements and how you communicate with stakeholders. We looked at how you develop your stakeholder engagement plan. Now, the last lesson is how you resolve the stakeholder conflict. If you're not following the lesson on stakeholders, you must just go back and go through the lessons, because each module, it had its own specific objective that it wanted to achieve. But I'll just give you maybe a recap on what is stakeholder management, why is it important, and we'll get into the topic how to resolve the conflict. Who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are institutions, people, communities that are not involved, but have interest in your business, on the success of your business, because they have some kind of benefit that they're gonna get from, or they're gonna earn from your business. So when you're talking stakeholders, we're talking shareholders, we're talking suppliers, we're talking government, we're talking community, we're talking employees. Those are generally the key stakeholders. And for other businesses, you can have maybe export markets and all those other stakeholders. But for this skills program, we're looking at this 5 key stakeholders. So whatever we've done throughout the lesson, we focus on these 5 key stakeholders because they are generically suitable, or they are generically relevant to almost all sectors. They are not sector specific. It doesn't matter which sector you are in, these stakeholders are relevant. And then we went into how you identify the key stakeholders that are important, and you identify their requirements. You come up with the communication plan, you come up with the engagement plan in terms of how you're going to engage with the stakeholders. And despite all this planning that you will be doing on how you're going to engage the stakeholders, then there will always be conflict. Like in any relationship, there will always be conflict. There will always be misunderstandings and all that. So you should be able to deal with the conflicts if they happen to arise, or if you experience them. And remember, with this module, the aim is to avoid stakeholder conflicts. So the intention of us going through this module is to avoid this. We don't want to be getting to a space where you have conflict with your stakeholders. So that's why we we developed this module to say you need to manage your stakeholders. And you remember from the previous lessons, we emphasize the importance of stakeholders, to say why is it important for you to engage the stakeholders. And in different lessons we show that, one, if you engage the stakeholders, you'll be able to build a good relationship within the environment that you are operating in. You'll have a good relationship with your suppliers, and if you have good relationship with the suppliers, then you might get benefits from like your favorable buying terms, and as well as information, because the suppliers will have exposure to the industry and know what's happening. So if you have a good relationship, they'll be able to share the information. If you have a good relationship with your employees, they'll be motivated and they'll work hard, they'll build trust, and they will be committed to the business, because without committed employees, then you're running a risk of your business not being successful and they can sabotage your business. 3, we spoke about the shareholders, to say you need to make sure that you engage the shareholders. You have the same vision as other shareholders. If to your business is you run it and you are also a shareholder, so the shareholders must have a common vision, and you must make sure that you regularly engage them with the shareholders meeting, sharing on the strategies, the vision, and all those things. So you need to engage the shareholders so that you have a common goal, because without that common goal or common vision, the shareholders might not support the business going forward. And without the support of the shareholders, then the business might struggle. And we also touched on the government side. And we've indicated that when it comes to government, it's more compliance, but you must also engage to make sure that you build a good relationship with the officials, because without a good relationship, they might implement the compliance part harder than if you had a good relationship. They can warn you, they can give you a leeway, they can be easy on you if you have a good relationship with them when it comes to government. And when it comes to community, you are working or you are operating within a community. It could be call it a residential community, it could be business community, it could be maybe you are part of the tenants in the mall, whatever. It depends on the type of business that you are running. Your community will always be different. Our community will not be the same as your community. So, but engaging with the community, you will be able to operate harmoniously within that environment. If you engage, you share information, you share relevant information, and you communicate the way you're supposed to be communicating, you engage on the issues that arise. Like if you're living within a community or within a space, there will always be those conflicts. So the sooner you address them and engage them, it will create a better operating environment. And as well, if you have a good relationship with your community, then it will tend to protect your business in a way that they will look after your business. Even if you are not there, they'll have interest. They'll make sure that they inform you on what's happening in the area. It might be security, it might be new developments, it might be opportunities. They will be able to share those with you if you have a good relationship with the community that you're operating in. And then, yes, despite your efforts and your strategies and your plans of engaging all the stakeholders, there is always not always, but most of the time, you will have conflict with your stakeholders. So now this lesson is just touching on the issues of how do you resolve your shareholder or your stakeholder conflict. Not only shareholders, but stakeholders, everyone involved in the business. How do you resolve the conflict? And obviously there is no standard method of resolving conflict. Remember, you have personality traits, you have cultural, you have business traits, or what's happening in the business and the community. They have their own dynamics. So you can't have one size fit all conflict resolution strategy. It depends on and the types of conflicts that you might experience. So each stakeholder might have its own dynamics. So you need to take that into account when dealing with conflicts. Remember, employee conflict will be different from community conflict. Shareholder conflicts will be different from supplier conflicts, and vice versa. So you can't have a blanket conflict resolution plan or strategy. It depends on the circumstances, the type of conflict, and all that. So, but now with this lesson, we're going to touch on all the key stakeholders to see how you resolve those conflicts and how you're supposed to manage them. But as I said, there is no blanket conflict resolution strategy that we'll share with you. But we'll highlight certain things with different stakeholders to how you deal with those to make sure that you are effective in dealing with the stakeholders when it comes to conflict management. Okay, so maybe the first one that will be more prominent or more common, it will be employee conflict, a conflict with employees. Because remember, you are in this scheme of stakeholders. Employees are the ones that they have constant contact with the business, with management. So if you have constant contact with someone, it is bound to say in some point in time you will have differences. So we'll start with the employee side in terms of how you resolve conflict. And we know that actually the relationship between employer and employee is governed by our Labor Relations Act. So in terms of labor relations, you need to behave in a certain way, and the employee is expected to behave in a certain way. And if there is a conflict, then it needs to be resolved, but in compliance with the labor relations, in compliance with the law, because you can't resolve conflicts between an employer and an employee or manager and employee the way you want. You need to make sure that you comply with the labor law. So how you deal with that is you need to make sure that you have systems in place, policies and procedures in place, more especially labor relations. You need to have your disciplinary codes. You need to have your performance management tools in place, and all that. And employee support or employee wellness programs in place. You need to comply with the legislation, like your labor laws, your employment equity, the health and safety. So the first thing that you need to make sure that you do to avoid the conflict is to make sure that you comply with the relevant legislations and the relevant laws. Okay. The employees must be in a conducive environment. It must be in a safe environment for them to be able to perform their duties. That's the first thing. You need to comply with the law, and you need to make sure that you register them for UIF, just in case maybe you dismiss them. They should be able to go claim from the UIF. You must make sure that you have quota for if they get injured at workplace, then they can go and claim from quota, because without having those, you might find yourself in trouble. There might be conflict where maybe you have to fire an employee. If the employee is fired, he needs to go to UIF to claim, and you didn't register them for UIF. So you'll be in trouble with the law if you didn't register them and all that. So with the employee, obviously there will be conflicts where employees are not doing what they're supposed to do, or maybe they feel the company is not doing what they're supposed to do, but the differences will happen. And sometimes the employees are not performing, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Then you might have that conflict. But I just want to highlight the fact that in South Africa, non-performance is not a misconduct. If the employee is not performing and you are unhappy with that employee that they are not performing, you need to prepare a performance improvement plan to improve their performance, because without doing that, then you might be in trouble, because you'll be contravening the law if you can dismiss them for performance related issues without putting a performance plan in place. So if the employee is not performing and you are not happy with that, you need to have your performance management plan. They need to have to develop the personal development plan that the employee must follow. And should the employee fail to follow a well drafted and implemented performance management plan, then that's when you can discipline them. But you can't discipline them before you put the performance management plan. You give them the necessary training and development so that they can be able to develop or to perform their duties. You must make sure that you do all that you can to improve the employee's competency before you get to the point that you decide to fire them or dismiss them, whatever it is, or put them through a disciplinary process. You should have done your part as the employer. That's why many companies are complaining, maybe international, but even local. They're complaining about our labor laws, and this is one of the sticky issues where they say it's difficult for companies to fire employees. You find that now even companies they're leaning towards labor brokers, because those ones are you just bring them, they're based on the contract. If they're not performing, they go, you bring new ones. They don't have to deal with the labor related issues. So you need to make sure that when it comes to performance, you do your part. You don't fire an employee just because they are not performing. You need to make sure that you implement their performance improvement plan. And when it comes to misconduct, because that's another conflict that will happen, where you believe the employee has done something wrong or something that they're not supposed to do. But remember, with misconduct, there must be a policy in place that will guide you that this employee misconducted themselves because they went against this policy of the company or these systems or these processes, or they didn't do what they're supposed to do according to the system that we have in place. So that means the important thing is you need to have a system in place. You need to have processes and procedures that the employee are trained on, they have knowledge of, that they need to follow. Because without you training them and having knowledge, they'll say we didn't know and we're not trained on that. So that will be their defense for whatever misconduct they might have done. They'll say, no, we didn't know about the policy, we're not trained, and I assume that I'm doing the right thing. And if you didn't train them and they didn't have access to the policy, you didn't make sure that they have access to that policy, then sometimes the labor or the CCMA might side with them to say, look, if you're going to say this was misconduct, where is the policy? Did the employee know about this policy? And if the employee didn't know about that policy, then it becomes a challenge. So you need to make sure that you develop proper human resource policies and procedures so that the employee can know what they're supposed to do, when and how. And you don't develop them and put them somewhere in your cupboard. You need to train these employees on those policies and procedures so that they understand them, so that they know what is expected from them, so that when you decide to take action against the employee, then it must be informed by the policy to say, we have this policy, you contravene this policy by acting this way, then that's why we're taking this specific action. Okay. So, and then if the employee contravene or misconducted themselves, then you don't just fire them on the spot. Doesn't matter how obvious the misconduct is. you need to make sure that you put them through a disciplinary process. Sometimes you need to implement what they call progressive disciplinary. It depends on the gravity of that offense. Sometimes you must give them a verbal warning, written warning, final warning before you take them to a disciplinary hearing. It doesn't mean with all offenses you have to follow that process to resolve the conflict that is happening there. It depends on the gravity of, if an employee, maybe they kill someone in the premises, negligently so, or because they were angry and all that, that's serious offense. It's a crime. Then you can take them straight to disciplinary and fire them. But if maybe they made a mistake with a customer and customer complained and all that, it might not be as serious, so you can give them a verbal warning. Should they repeat that, then you give them a written warning. Should they repeat that, then you give them maybe a third warning or second warning. Then you can take them, it depends on your policy, then you can take them to disciplinary if they continue. Okay, and then just make sure it's not a performance issue, it's a misconduct. Then you take them to a disciplinary hearing. Obviously, at the disciplinary hearing, you must give them a fair chance or a fair process where they can present their case. They can bring lawyers if your policy allows. They can to make their case, and you need to have call it independent chair, a person who's not conflicted in that conflict that you are having with the employee, or in that misconduct. They're not involved, they're not directly involved, so that they can give independent sanction after they've listened to the case fairly so. Because if the person is not independent, they can still take you to CCMA, and that process will be, you might find that it's not procedurally substantive. So you need to make sure that you follow the process of the disciplinary. You give the employee a chance, you give them the manager or whoever, even if it's you, a chance to put your case forward. They need to reply or whatever, respond to it, and the chair of the disciplinary needs to make a decision if the employee must be fired, given a warning, or whatever the case may be. But you need to make sure that you follow the process, because if you don't follow the process, then they can take you to the CCMA. And remember, CCMA is not a one day. It could be one day, but it takes a lot out of your company and the resources. You need to go there, prepare. Sometimes you need to pay the lawyers. They need to pay their lawyers. Then you go there, you sit there for 2-3 days maybe, and then the decision comes. It might be that you need to, if they find it that maybe procedurally or substantively it was unfair. So if procedurally it's unfair, maybe they might not reinstate the employee. But if substantively and procedurally the process was unfair, then the CMA might decide to say you need to reinstate the employee. So that's the conflict on the employee side, and this is how generally, but this one is legislated, this is how generally you can resolve it. But you don't have to go to disciplinary hearing. That's the last resort. Generally, if you have systems in place, you train your employees, they understand what they need to do and all that, it doesn't get there. But there's some employees who are just stubborn and they're not willing to work, whatever. Then this is the process that you need to follow. And as well, to avoid getting into these conflicts, or maybe more especially on non-performance and all those things, you need to have your performance management system on lock, where you will be able to monitor the performance. You engage on the performance, you set targets. If they achieve targets, you give them bonuses and all those things. So you need to have your performance management in place so that you're consistently monitoring the performance of your employees. You don't wait when the employee is not performing and you start giving them feedback then. You need to make sure that you follow you follow a performance monitoring process that will be more helpful to the employee, where it will be more fruitful and help employee to improve their performance. So that's how you deal with employee conflict as the first stakeholder that we're dealing with in this lesson. That's the conflict between the company or the management and the employee. Performance management system training, have the systems and procedures, make sure that you follow the legislations, make sure that you have your labor relations processes and procedures in place, so that you are able to deal with employees effectively. Remember, the priority is not to get to a point where you are in conflict and there's disciplinary misconduct and all that. That should be avoided. But we know with employees, it's not possible that you can fully avoid that process. Okay. So that's on the employee side. Then the other key stakeholder you might have conflict with is shareholders, where shareholders are having conflict. Generally, we start businesses and we invite shareholders. Might find that it's 2, 3, 4 of us because we know each other or we have some kind of relationship, right? And like any other marriage, there is a possibility of divorce. And sometimes when things are happy, hunky-dory, we forget that we need to enter into a shareholders agreement. Because without shareholders agreement, you don't have a documentation or a guiding tool that shows you or help you guys on how to behave. Because with the shareholders agreement, you will set the behavior that is expected, the voting, the meetings that needs to be held, the shareholders' involvement in the business. So it basically governs your relationship. Without a document that is governing the relationship, when the conflict happens, then you might end up in a legal case because you didn't have proper document to govern the relationship. Yes, you're not anticipating that you guys are going to fight or break up, whatever it is. But for you to avoid conflicts on their own, to start with, if you had the shareholders agreement up front, maybe that the conflict when going forward, when you start making money, or who is supposed to invest how much in the business, it will be resolved by your shareholders agreement. And without the shareholders agreement, then somebody might feel that I've put so much and you put little and all these things, then now you are making money, then you want to take the same amount as me. But if you had the shareholders agreement, that would have guided you guys on how you're going to do your profit share, how you're going to recapitalize the business, how you're going to vote on certain things, when are you supposed to have meetings and all that. So it's very important that when you start a business, if you have other partners, the shareholders, then make sure that you draft a proper shareholders agreement as a guiding tool, because it will help you guys to manage your relationship. That's on the company. And then on the cooperative side, they have a constitution as well. A constitution for cooperatives, it guides the behavior or the expected behavior and how issues are supposed to be resolved. If there are conflicts, this is how we're going to resolve it. It gives you details of how the relationship, how you're supposed to manage the relationship between shareholders. So don't neglect the drafting of the shareholders agreement. I know initially you might think it's not necessary because no, we're small, no, we have an understanding, no, we're good friends, no, we're family. Just ignore that. Just do your business the way you will do business. This is business, it's not personal. So you need to make sure that you draft a shareholders agreement or a constitution that will help you guys when there is conflict. It will give you direction in how you resolve that conflict. Okay. If you have maybe differences of opinion, of strategy, must put things to a vote. I know with like cooperative, their constitution is more democratic in a way that one person, one vote. You have equal votes. But with the private company, you can have different shares. You can have different, different number of shares in the business. And if you have different number of shares in the business, then they can even change the voting to say, if we have an issue on the table that we're supposed to vote on, this is how we vote. It's not always the majority rule. Oh, it is, but you might find certain people that have more shares, others have less, and their voting power is more than the other. So with the private company is different. So you need to make sure that you have a shareholders agreement that addresses those issues, so that when you get to a point where there is a disagreement, then you know that you have a document that will guide you guys on how you resolve that issue. Okay, so don't ignore the shareholders agreement. Find a shareholders agreement that works for you, and then you guys read it. You can customize it the way you want to customize it, depending on how many shares the person owns, or how much a person has contributed to the business. This is how much their percentage of the shares to the voting power, or the number of votes that they can vote. If you have a difference in, or there's something on the table, you don't have to have a difference. It's just that you need to have something on the table that needs to be voted on. Then you know how you're going to vote. Because without the shareholders agreement, you might not know how to vote. Then, no, I'm involved, I'm operationally involved, I've put a lot of money in the business, or wara, I'm older. Those issues will come to the fore. But if you have a shareholders agreement, then it addresses those conflicts. It tells you, if this is the case, this is how we deal with it. And that will avoid breakups and fights, unnecessary conflicts amongst the shareholders. So the shareholders agreement is a very, very important tool that you need to use to manage your conflict, to resolve conflicts. Actually, even to avoid conflict. Because if you have the shareholders agreement, then you might be able to avoid the conflicts. That was on shareholders conflict. And then maybe another one, it might be community conflict. Remember, I always emphasize, when I'm saying community, it's not necessarily the residential community. The community, the people that you are operating in their space, the people that are in the same community, in the same area. It might be you are in the industrial park, other businesses, you are in a mall, or you are operating in an association and all that. They become your community. So in terms of the community, you need to make sure that there is proper communication. Remember, with these ones, actually, you don't necessarily have a legal relationship with them. It's a more social relationship, because you don't have a contract with each other. You might be in the same mall, you might be paying the same landlord, but you guys don't have a contract. You might be in a community operating your business, you might not have a contract with the community. You might be in an industrial park, you might be part of an association where you are subscribing to the association, whatever, but you don't necessarily have a contract with your fellow members. Yes, you have a moral contract or social contract between the two of you, but not necessarily a legal one. So resolving this one is a little bit tricky, because we don't have a legal framework that it can help you to resolve the issue, because you can't enter into necessarily a contract that, no, this is the community, this is us. Yes, you can enter into contract to do certain things, specific things, but not on the relationship itself. You can't enter into a relationship contract, you can't enter into a marriage with the community. Okay, unless if they are shareholders, or they are customers, or they are suppliers. But as the community members, you don't have a legal contract with them. So there is no contractual resolution that you can have, or conflict management from a contract as such, because you don't have that legal relationship. So in this case, you will mainly resolve this conflict through engagement. You might have differences from the community. They feel you are doing certain things in a certain way. You might have your different opinion on how you do things. Then you need to engage with this community. It's more on the engagement. It's more on the communication. It's more on relationship management. To say, how do you manage this relationship? Be transparent, be consistent, and then make sure that you do it regularly. You communicate with your community regularly. If there is conflict, you need to find a better mechanism of resolving the conflict. It can be through meetings, it could be through calls, speaking to the key stakeholders, meaning within the community, to show them your reasons and all that. So resolving the community conflict is more on engagement, is more on understanding the culture, the people that you're dealing with, the social environment that they are in, level of education and all that. You need to take all those things into consideration when you're dealing with the community. One, but as I say, and I continuously emphasize, is to avoid getting into a point where there is conflict. Because once you are in the conflict, community it consists of many people. It might be a difficult thing to resolve. It's not as easy as a one-on-one. If it's one-on-one, then it might be easy because you know you are dealing with this person. But you might be when you're dealing with the community, you're dealing with people from different cultures. They have their own issues. They have their own mental problems, marital problems, social problems, money problems. It's a combination of problems, like it's just a concoction. So dealing with a community, it's very, very difficult, most especially when you are in a conflict. Because to resolve that, it becomes very, very difficult. So what you need to do as a business, you need to avoid getting into a conflict with them. And to avoid that is to make sure that you engage the community regularly. Make sure that you communicate. Make sure that you are clear, you're consistent, you're honest, you are transparent in your communication, so that you don't get to the point where you are in conflict. But it happens. You might, despite all your efforts, you might eventually be having your differences. Then, if you get to that point, then you need to make sure that you engage, you are open when you are addressing the issues, you are upfront, and be proactive. If you see that there is a conflict that is brewing within the community, engage the community early so that you can nip it in the bud, rather than waiting until it is fully blown and they can end up banning your business and all that. So it can get worse. So with the community, make sure that if you identify that there might be conflict, start engaging. Be proactive about it. Engage, understand the community, discuss, convince each other, try to find a resolution earlier on, so that by the time you don't allow it to get to the point where it's very, very volatile and the relationship is broken down completely, because it might be irrecoverable. And remember, when we throughout the lesson, I've always been indicating how serious community engagement is, how serious a community is to your business. Because these are the people that you are operating in their space. These are people that you might be seeing every day, or you might be interacting directly or indirectly every day. So if you are in conflict, they might even sabotage your business. And you don't want to be in a space that you are where you are not trusting each other with your community members, with your fellow business owners in the area, because you might end up even killing each other. I mean, business is business, so people will go to extreme length to defend their business. So you don't want to be getting into that level of conflict. So you need to make sure that you resolve that conflict early on. As soon as you see that there might be issues here, engage, communicate to see how you can resolve it earlier on before it escalates to a point where you might find it difficult to resolve it. So that's on the community. I know it's a little bit dicey dealing with different personalities, different individuals with different interests. And some, they might even not want you to succeed. Because remember, I always said that stakeholders are the people who have vested interest in your business. They want to see you succeed. But sometimes even the community members, they don't have interest in you succeeding. So if a conflict can arise, then they'll take advantage of that conflict to destroy you or to do something that will negatively impact your business. So don't allow that to happen. Engage early. Make sure that the communication is clear. Make sure that you try to resolve it before it escalates. Before others see it as an opportunity. Because some people are opportunistic. It can be an innocent conflict, and because they have self-interest, then they blow it out of proportion, and it might affect your business negatively. So just be careful when you're dealing with the community. Make sure that you manage your community well, so that you maintain good relationship, so that you don't get to a point where your business is at risk. Okay. So that's on the conflict on the community side. And then the other key stakeholders on government side. Generally, the conflict when it comes to government, it might be you not complying or they not doing what they're supposed to do to help you or to give you the license that you might need or to give you the approvals and all those things. So when it comes to government, it's two-way. You are not complying, they will come hard on you. Remember, they have a legal obligation to enforce whatever it is. If it's a license, you are operating without a license, yes, they will come heavy on you to implement the legislation, most especially if you don't have a good relationship. Okay. So as we said earlier in the earlier lessons, we say you need to build a good rapport with government, so that even if you are not complying, they can help you, they can support you to make sure that you comply. Okay, they can give you maybe a relaxed requirements in complying, because if you don't have a good relationship, they might say you comply or you shut down. You comply or you close your business. You comply or we charge you penalties. They can't be that strict, because the law allows them to do that. It will be within their rights, actually. They will be implementing the law to the latter. But if you have a good relationship with them, if you are engaging, then they'll let you know the possibilities. No, we can resolve it this way. Because remember, even with government, there are conflict resolution mechanisms that the law allows. But if you don't have a good relationship, implement the law as they should, strictly so. So your engagement becomes very, very important. It can be standing between you and your business closing. So make sure that you build that relationship. Make sure that you always comply. Don't get to a point where you're not complying, because now it becomes a problem. Make sure that you have systems and processes in place to make sure that you're always complying with the legislation, or you are complying with the things that you're supposed to comply with. That becomes very, very, very important. Okay, and then on the other side, it might be that yes, you are complying, but they are not complying, despite you maybe submitting your applications early for licenses, for accreditations and all that. They might not do what they're supposed to do on their end. And you need to find a way you're dealing with it. Obviously, initially, because you don't want to antagonize the person that you're dealing with directly. Try as much as you can. Calm so follow up, work with them, meet with them, engage them on your issue, why your application is not being processed and all those things. Then if the engagement is failing, then that's when you can escalate the matter to maybe their bosses and whoever. I mean, you can go all the way to the president, his government. The door's supposed to be open if you are not getting assisted. But with the principle of Ubuntu and stuff like that, first you need to engage, talk, see how you can resolve this issue. What are the challenges? How can I make your life easier for you to be able to help me? Like the Jerry Maguire, help me to help you. How can I help you to help me? Those are the kind of things that you need to do when you're dealing with government or officials. Then, yes, they might not eventually help, then you can escalate the matter. That's how generally you should deal with conflict when it comes to government officials. But avoid being in that position. If you have to renew your licenses, do them early. Renew your licenses early. Make sure that you comply with the legislation. Make sure that you comply with the conditions of your license. That's the first thing. And should you fail for whatever reason, then you need to continuously make sure that you have a good relationship with government, people who are responsible for your sector or for your space. So that should you fail for whatever reason to comply, you know that you can engage them, you can see how you can resolve the situation. And if the challenge is on their side where you guys are fighting because they're not doing what they're supposed to do, engage, understand their situation, understand why you're not being helped, and find a solution. Failure which you need to escalate it to their managers, to MECs, ministers, whoever that you need to escalate the matter to. You shouldn't leave the matter with the official, mostly if it's a compliance thing. Because you can operate without a license, and if that another person comes from government person and says, where's the license? And you don't have a license, they can shut you down. The fact that the other person is not doing that job is not an excuse to operate without a license, for argument's sake. So if it's not getting resolved, you need to escalate it until the problem gets resolved. So that's how you deal with your government stakeholders. But the main thing is, don't get to a point where there is conflict. Engage, communicate. Engage, communicate. It's very, very important. So that you keep them in the loop, you follow up on your applications, you keep an open relationship where you keep continuously engaged, even if you don't need anything from them. Once in a while, you just go check them, speak to them, check what's happening, what's new, what must I be aware of, and all those things. Because out of sight, out of mind. So if you are not around, they'll forget that you even exist. There might be new legislations coming that if you're engaging, you can actually prepare your business for the next level. Okay, so that's on the government stakeholder. Now we're going to look into your suppliers. Okay, now the last stakeholder conflict that we'll deal with is from the supplier side. Okay, those are the ones that you need to make sure that you build good relationship with, because always they are more your bosses than any other stakeholder, because you are relying on the suppliers for your business to be successful. Okay. I'm saying for those businesses that need suppliers, because remember, sometimes you don't need the suppliers. If you are a service business, you are relying more on your employees because they're the ones who are key. But if you are manufacturing, you are supplying, you are selling stuff, you're buying products, your suppliers are your bosses. Your suppliers are the people who will make a difference between your business success and failure. And I always say that money is made in the supply chain. if you are not managing that process, if you are not on top of that process of managing your suppliers, building a good relationship with your suppliers, then you might be putting your business at risk. Actually, as part of our Super Team Maker program, we have supply chain on its own, because it's so important, and we tend to ignore it as small businesses. The supply chain is important because that's where the money is made. That's where you can get your discounts. So that's where you can get supplied more efficiently. That's where you can order and your things get there quicker than your competitors. Because sometimes, if you're not building a good relationship with your suppliers, you might buy at high prices. They might deliver late. They might deliver poor quality product. They might not look after you. They might even, to an extent of refusing to sell to you. That's how bad it could be with your suppliers or your supply chain. So you need to make sure that you manage your supply chain, you manage your suppliers, you avoid conflicts at all times. And sometimes, yes, conflicts, it might not be your fault. I mean, you get bad people out there who just want to sabotage your business. Might be motivated by hate, race, gender, whatever the reasons, religion. You might find that you're dealing with a supplier that doesn't like you anyway, for whatever reason. That sometimes you can't do anything to make those people love you. It might be something that you can't control. Even if that is the case, make sure that you humble yourself. You deal with them with respect. You make sure that you pay them when you're supposed to pay them. You make sure that you inform them if you have issues. Make sure that you engage them. Then that sometimes it might soften them up. They might not be hard on you as they would have been if you are not engaging them. Yes, they might have natural hate, but they might not have reasons to harm you, even if they don't like you. But if you are treating them with respect, you are communicating, you are transparent with them, you are paying them on time, you are being a good citizen, you are dealing with them the way that you're supposed to, as part of your key stakeholder. That now it might make it easier, that relationship easier. But sometimes you don't have a choice. You might find they are the sole supplier of a product that you need, or they are the most efficient one, or they are the cheapest, or they are the ones who are providing quality, depending on what you're looking for. Sometimes it's just not as easy to switch suppliers, to say, no, okay, I'm not buying from this one, now I'm going to go buy from this one. Because you might have a specialized product that you need to buy from them. You need them. You might need them. It might be a landlord. That premise, the premises that you are operating from, they might be specialized, that you need them. Therefore, you need to be able to manage that relationship. You need to be able to blow their horns so that you build a harmonious relationship with them. But on the other side, obviously, as you build in that relationship, it might be frustrating. If that conflict exists and continues, you might have to leverage and find maybe potential other suppliers and look for other suppliers that can supply you as an alternative, because sometimes you can do all you can, but you find that no, they're not buying it, they're not interested. So you need to make sure that you build a good relationship in a way that by the time they decide not to supply you anymore, then you must find an alternative. So you must always research on your industry to find the best suppliers in all that. And most importantly, with the suppliers, sometimes you might buy ad hoc, or you might enter into a supply agreement. That now, the supply agreement might limit the conflicts, because if it is an agreement, It's in black and white. You say they will supply this at this price. Their delivery times is this and this and this. So that service level agreement will help manage the relationship between you and your supplier, where is possible. But remember, sometimes you are small, they don't want to enter a contract with you. You just have to be in your best behavior when it comes to the suppliers. I know sometimes people start businesses because they want to be their own bosses. No, it doesn't work like that. When you start a business, you actually have many bosses, because you have your customers as your bosses, your suppliers as your bosses, employees, you need them. They can manage you. So you are caught between a rock and a hard place. You want to give your customer best service, and you have the suppliers that are giving you hard time on the other side, most especially when there is conflict. So build a good relationship with them. Make sure that you communicate with them regularly, you update them on what's happening, but most importantly, you pay them on time, and you become loyal, where if they're offering you best prices and all that, you mustn't just be all over the place, buy there, and then sometimes you don't buy, sometimes you buy, because that as well create conflict, because they don't trust you. Sometimes they find that they rely on you to buy from them, and this month you decide to go buy wherever you buy because you are feeling the way you are feeling. Then they don't do business as they used to, and that can negatively affect that relationship. So if you found a good supplier, be loyal to that supplier. If there's another supplier who's new, who's coming up with better prices, be open with your supplier. Say, hey, there's this guy who's supplying this and this and this. He says he can supply me with this, but I've been dealing with you for a long time. Is it possible for us to negotiate the price? I don't want to move there. Rather than moving to a new supplier, which might not last. Remember, new guys try new things. You go that side and you come back again. Oh, now you are back. Then they might not treat you the way they used to treat you. They might give you a poor quality stuff. They might have found other loyal customers that they give preference over you and all that. So with building a relationship with the suppliers, make sure that you don't create an environment where the conflict will breed. Make sure that you are open, you are clear. Yes, I'm not saying you must buy even when they're selling to you at high prices. I'm saying if you find alternative, speak to them to say, I've been buying from you for a long time. Hey, this is the new supply. This is what they're offering. Or even if it's quality or whatever the reason it is that you might be thinking of switching. Speak to the guys that you've been dealing with for a long time and try to negotiate. Maybe they can come to the party and you'll continue the relationship. Remember, there's that thing of saying, better the devil that you know. If you're dealing with someone for a long time, then negotiate with them. If there are price issues, you are finding challenges between the issues, they are charging you a high price and there's someone who can charge you less, those things cause conflict. But if you become transparent about it and you become open, you will say, no, honestly, this is the offer that I'm getting on the other side. Can you help me with the lower prices, if possible? But if not possible, I'll consider going that side. Even when you come back, because you told them that you are going there because of the price, and even if that guy fails, when you come back, I think they will appreciate the honesty that you told them that, no, you're moving because of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, some people can be vindictive, of course, to say, no, you went and whatever. But if a person is vindictive, you told them, you didn't tell them, it won't make a difference. But if you told them and you spoke to them before you changed or you moved, then they might welcome you back. And again, if there's something that you don't like or some service that you are not happy with or the behavior that you are not happy with from your supplier side, you need to make sure that you communicate as well. Make sure that you let them know to say, hey, we're having a challenge here. I don't like the way you're delivering or you don't like the the quality that you are giving to me now, or I don't understand why you're selling to me at a higher prices while you're selling to others at a lower prices, or something like that. If you identify differences or something that can cause conflict, address it early. Be open about it with your suppliers so that you don't break the relationship, because you might be angry about some things that they do. And sometimes you might find even the bosses are not aware. It might be the delivery guy or the store guy or the person that you're buying from who's doing other things that the company is not supportive. And you just become angry with the way you are being treated without engaging. But if you start engaging, you might get to the root cause. You might find that actually the company likes you. It's just the person that you are dealing with, the middleman that you're dealing with, or the person, the front person. Then what you can do is communicate. First, you obviously will try it with the person that you're dealing with, and if you're not getting joy, then you can escalate it to maybe their managers, whoever. But you must know that before you break that relationship, that you've tried everything that you can. You didn't just leave any problems where you're seeing that, oh, this thing is happening, I'm gonna move. You might find that actually it's not even that serious. Maybe it's one employee who's just misbehaving rather than the way the company will want to treat you. By raising that with the company, then it might make your life easier. The issue might be resolved. Yeah, in certain cases it might not be resolved, but don't leave things to chance. Engage, communicate early on to see if you can resolve this conflict. And remember, I emphasize that even though we're discussing on how you can resolve the conflict between you and your supplier, or other stakeholders for that matter, the main thing is we shouldn't even get there. We should avoid getting to the point where the conflict exists. You must nip it in the bud, make sure that it's getting addressed before it gets to a point where it's not manageable and it can break the relationship. And we need to accept that conflicts will always be there in any relationship. And as I've said, that remember, this is just a generic explanation, and the conflict might be different. It might be a conflict where you need an expert to resolve the conflict. There might be a conflict to say, no, this thing, maybe your products are not perfect because the supplier is giving you a poor quality thing. You might need an expert to assess if your complaint is valid. Okay. And then you might need an adjudication depending on the type of agreement that you have. Like if it's a CCMA issue with the employee, obviously, or the labor relation issue, you can take it to CCMA. If it's a shareholder issue, you can take it to adjudication, depending on what your shareholders agreement say. If it's a community issue, you can take it to the local council or the political councillor, or to the landlord if it's about the tenants and all that. So there are mechanisms to resolve issues, and there are different mechanisms. Not all conflicts will be resolved the same. So, but the main thing is to avoid getting into conflict, because once you're in a conflict, it takes a lot of energy. It causes stress and all that. What you need to do is to manage the relationship. Make sure you communicate. Make sure you engage. Make sure that you know what your stakeholders' needs are, and you manage those so that you avoid the conflict. But obviously, if you get into the conflict, we've highlighted some of the actions that you can take. But this is not exhaustive. This is not standard, or it's not. Stakeholders are different. They have different cultures, different behaviors. The reasons why you are in conflict are different. So you can't have a blanket conflict resolution strategy. So when you're dealing with different stakeholders, you need to make sure that you apply, depending on the situation that you find yourself in, you apply different strategies, open-minded. So this module was just a guide on the certain things that you can do. But you need to look at do your situational analysis, see the players that you are dealing with, and see the best strategies that you can come up with. But my advice is avoid getting into a point where you are in conflict. Avoid the conflict as much as you can. But if you're in a conflict, find the best way to resolve that conflict. I hope this lesson will contribute positively to your business, and try to implement it as entrepreneurs out there. We know that entrepreneurship is difficult, so you need to avoid to be in the battles that you're not supposed to be in. I thank you.